Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to Mentor Monday. Mentor Monday is your weekly microdose of encouragement, inspiration, and miracle grow on your potential as a coach. I'm getting there closer and closer to getting this throat back together. I tell you, we had this weird head cold, whatever, but a lot of it went to my throat and kind of knocked me out of action for a couple of Mondays. But I'm back again for the second week in a row. And so I'm very privileged and very happy to be with you. Do me a huge favor. Jump in to the chat right now and tell us hello. Tell us where you're joining us from, what you're excited about, what you feel life and momentum on in your life. There is Dr. Fredina from Ohio. Welcome. Ohio making it back into now. I know that you're in Cleveland, so most people are Browns fans, but I am a Bengals fan because Joe Burrow, their quarterback, was our quarterback at LSU. And to bring that team along with Jamar Chase, who's from LSU, also I think a linebacker is from LSU. It's on this team. So it's almost like watching my Tigers, but they're Bengals, kind of thing or whatever. But anyway, 30 years for Ohio to get back in the Super Bowl. I think it's pretty awesome. There's Shane joining us from North Carolina. Hey, Shane. And Brittany joining us from Phoenix. Joan, who's joining us from Bakersfield, excited to be encouraged today. And Darsalam, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Can't wait to get my certification made in Mia. Awesome. Anybody else that would like to say hello before we jump in? And if you're just making it in, we're just saying hello to everybody who's here. So just a huge favor and throw that in the chat and we will acknowledge you. And also we're going to do our best to answer any questions today as well on this topic that we have been on for the last, the second week, actually. There's Gigi, who is joining. It says traveling in Texas, but from California. Can't miss these Monday teachings. Thanks so much, Gigi. All right, everyone. Well, a couple of weeks ago, let me say hello over here. Thank you. From Morocco? Awesome. Very cool. All right. So a couple of weeks ago, I sent an email out. It was during my sick week, right? You guys weren't seeing me, but I sent an email out. And I was saying, because what we always love to do is that we love to always talk about relevant things for the people who are part of our program or who are thinking about breaking into coaching, because a lot of our conversations are every week with coaches. We always want to be really relevant with anything that we're talking about. And so basically I sent an email out to thousands of aspiring coaches the other day and say, hey, currently right now, what's the thing that's actually keeping you from moving forward, getting started? And so sometimes we get the common answers, and then sometimes we get newish answers that we want to try to address and these kinds of things. And so Mentor Monday is always designed around that. This week, we're talking about imposter syndrome, which is incredibly common amongst coaches. Now, let me give you a hint. Not that you have to do major research on imposter syndrome or any of those other things, but let me give you a hint right on the front end that I hope really encourages you guys. From the research that's been done, the people who actually suffer with imposter syndrome are actually high achievers. And so that's what I'm going to say on the front end. For those of you who think that you have imposter syndrome, or you have a belief, you've thought that you have imposter syndrome, you read it and you're like, oh, this is how I've kind of felt my whole life or something like that. You, my friend, are most likely a high achiever. So congratulations on being a high achiever, because high achievers are the people who are wrestling around with this thing. And so for those of you who don't really have a great handle, let me say hello to Chantel joining us from Raleigh. Welcome. For those of you who don't really have a great handle on imposter syndrome, if you've heard someone say that, or you're kind of like, well, remind me of what that was, what that is again. I want to give you a couple of examples of what that might look like, might feel like for someone who's wrestling around with this. So here's a couple of examples. One is what it looks like is basically you rarely give yourself credit. Now, I mean, that's not, that's not proof that that's something that you're wrestling around with. But when you struggle to give yourself credit for something, like any kind of success, anything that you're particularly good at, to come to a place and say, yeah, I'm really, really good at this. Now, a lot of times when we're growing up, sometimes we're just told, well, you want to be modest, you want to be humble and all this, but this is a little bit different than that, because there is a certain amount of humility and, we don't want to be like flashy in front of people. We're not trying to prove ourselves in front of people, and so we kind of control what that looks like, but we're talking about internally what's actually happening to yourself, because this is the dialogue that's actually happening inside you. It's this inner critic, and it's this sort of self-doubt that's kind of in there that you wouldn't give yourself credit. Because there are some people who won't give themselves credit in front of everybody else, but they don't have imposter syndrome or whatever. But in you won't give yourself credit. Here's another one. Another example is that you see your success as a luck of the draw or chance. Have you ever had something really great happen to you, something really big, something really amazing? You got accepted into something, you got an award, you did something really huge. Maybe not you, but maybe you heard somebody say, it was just, I got lucky. You ever hear people say when people are trying to give them kudos or credit for something that they did in their life, or they had some huge success in a company, and somebody was just like, you might even hear an acceptance speech where somebody says, I just got really, really lucky. It was the luck of the draw. It was just chance. Now, there's some people who will say that, obviously, trying to be putting on false humility. But there are people who literally are like, I don't know if I actually deserve this. I feel like I just kind of got lucky. Now, here's the thing. Luck's a funny thing, because reality is that we're not really dealing in luck in the world. What we would say is that there are definitely potentials for different things happening, low likelihood for certain things happening, or whatever, like the lottery, winning the lottery, those kinds of things. But the reality is that when people are doing the right things in their life, actually it improves the chances of anything. People who are consistent, all those other kinds of things. But let's go on to a couple of more of these things of what it looks like. You think anyone is good enough to do what you already do. And so this is a pretty normal thing for people who have imposter syndrome, is they don't really think that what they do is particularly unique, particularly talented, particularly a skill. Matter of fact, the way that they look at other people in their comparison is that they're kind of like, I'm not really smarter, I'm not really more skilled, and probably anybody could learn to do what I do. Now, there are some people who say that in a false humility kind of way, but inside their heart, they're kind of like, I'm nobody could really, like, I can say this, but somebody really can't do what I'm doing. That's false humility. I'm talking about, again, the condition in your heart, what you are telling yourself, that even when you say it, this is actually what's in alignment with your heart, that you're like, there's nothing particularly savvy, creative, resourceful about me. Pretty much anybody can do it. That's a real possibility that we've got imposter syndrome working. Another thing that people with imposter syndrome might say or might live into is that I'm just not good enough yet. What do I mean by that? Well, how many people do you know that are on this quest, this unstoppable quest for growth and knowledge and training and all of these different kinds of things? Now, here's the thing, is that it may be in a lot of different areas. Like, I can remember some guys who are incredible athletes. I remember like this bodybuilder guy who was in the gym that looked like he was chiseled out of stone. But this guy would never tried to give anybody advice. He stuck to himself. He ate his stuff. Matter of fact, most of the time he would wear all these heavy clothes and everything else where people really couldn't see what he looked like. And he would never go into competition. He would never do anything and put himself out there. And he would say things like, well, it's just, I'm not there yet. And if you looked at the guy, you'd be like, you would blow everybody away. And it was an interesting way that he saw, as much as he worked on himself, he was never able to actually make that turn and say, hey, I'm making all this investment. Because if you asked him, It wasn't just to get healthy. It wasn't just to be in the gym. There was a commitment towards something, but at some point, he wouldn't enter in to actually doing the thing that was in his heart, which ultimately he wanted to compete and do some of those other kinds of things, but he would never put himself in competition. He'd never put himself alongside other people. And there was always that nagging feeling, that nagging thought, I'm just not good enough yet. Here's the last one. And obviously these aren't exhaustive, but things that you're really good at. You simply just regard them as too easy. So what am I saying about that? I'm saying that people, a lot of times they're really, really good at stuff and they're just like, well, that's too easy. A lot of times people will say, it wasn't making me sweat. It wasn't making me work really, really hard. And so they think because they weren't, working their butts off or sweating profusely or in pain or something like that, that for some reason that's more lower regarded. And that just means that, well, that was just too easy. These are some of the things that imposter syndrome looks like. And all of us probably have various degrees of maybe one of these things or a couple. As a matter of fact, if you did a little bit more research, there's a couple of books out there that some great self-help books where they've kind of said, there's about 5 different types of these kinds of things or whatever. But what I want to do is kind of give you an overview that if you find some of these and you're like, yeah, that sounds like me, then what I want to do today is try to give you a couple of hacks maybe around that. Let me just look over here at our chat really quick. And I want to say hello to anyone that is saying hello. There's Andrea. Hey, Andrea from Minneapolis. Melissa said she's running by. No, you're just in time for the most important part. And Shane says, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. That's a great quote. Awesome. So how can we help somebody? How can you maybe help one of your clients? Maybe how can you help yourself be able to move forward, particularly if you're having trouble getting traction and making progress as a coach? Here's a couple of what I want to say. I want to give you hacks around this thing. And the first hack, these 2 hacks that I want to give you are really about perspectives. One of the things that we always teach in our life coach training is that one of the things that we need to do a lot of times is to get a different perspective or reframe. If you ever see a framed picture, and unfortunately I don't have one like right in front of me to show you, but if you had a framed picture, what the frame does is that it calls to attention that part of the picture that you want people to see. So you've got a frame around it, and that's what the focal point is. But sometimes people will get a great picture. In these days, our cameras are so much better. If you've got an iPhone or whatever, you get a lot of pixels in that. Like years ago, some of you are as old as I am. I'm nearing 50, just a few years away from 50. And what happens is as you get older, you get more appreciative of technology, and we're blown away by things. You're like, look at how great you can like zoom in on this. Like you can see their blackheads or something like that. Like we marvel at these things because the cameras that we had when we were growing up, like Polaroids and a lot of these different kinds of things, didn't really have a lot of detail in them. And even the digital cameras that we used to get really were pretty fuzzy. They were like 800 by 600 max, something like some weird shaped photo that really didn't look that good. And I remember when we tried to go digital in the very beginning, and my wife was so upset because the pictures were always terrible, and they always had graininess in it. These days, though, you can get like, 10,000 pixels all the way across. So you know what? You get so much detail, and it ends up being, if you were trying to print it out, you could print it out on like a big wall. But you know what you could do? You can also take something that's so big and you can frame any portion of it that you want. You can look at any perspective of something that you want. You can, and I'll talk about this in just a second, you can tell a story about any portion of that picture that you want to focus on. And so really what we want to do is that I want to give you 2 perspectives of the way that you can look at yourself that hopefully can give you something that you can start practicing every day to help you shift out of this imposter syndrome. And this is going to take work, okay? This is going to take discipline because some of you know, hey, you know what? I wrestle around with imposter syndrome. But knowing that that's something that you wrestle with and doing something about it. Because it's not helping us just to tell people, yeah, I have imposter syndrome. No, like, well, how do you actually do something about it? And so here's a couple of perspectives that I want to give you. First perspective is this, is that we need to first start off with a heart of gratitude for the things that come easy for us. Because I think it's a limited perspective if any of you think that the stuff that you do on a daily basis that you don't really give a whole lot of thought to are simple kinds of things, are untalented and unskilled and unlearned, and that you're not remarkably smart because you're able to do those things. I mean, sometimes when you meet someone who's truly not able to even function at the level of a human being that you are, it takes those kinds of things to actually give you gratitude about them. Like some of you, I don't know if you've ever, some of you are battling around and you haven't gotten COVID yet or whatever, but I got it. And I was so knocked out for about 3 weeks that I could hardly lift my head up off the pillow. Massive headache, sinus stuff, all kinds of junk like this, like a year ago. It was so bad that it was like I couldn't even stand up. I truly could not function. I could barely send an email, any of those things. And I remember when I could function again, first time that I walked out on the beach again. I remember the first Mentor Monday that I did after that. And I could probably go back to that video, and I looked at you guys out there, and I said, I am so thankful to be able to stand, to be vertical in front of you. You have no idea what a gift that is, to be able to stand, to be able to speak, to be able to look, to be able to see, to be able to touch, to be able to feed yourself, to all of these different kinds of things. See, one of the things that we've got to develop in our life is a real heart of gratitude. And I think that most of the time, and I'm not saying that this is your problem, I'm not saying that you guys have a problem with this. I would say, though, that in generally speaking, is that when we compare and when we look at what's going on in the world, we're always thinking that we're in lack. We're always thinking that there's something better, there's somebody better, all of those kinds of things. Is that comparison leaves us in this place where, and I understand, I never want to get content with life that I don't have drive and passion to grow and develop. But also alongside that is that we truly have to walk this life out. If we're going to be satisfied and we're really going to grow with a true perspective of having gratitude in our hearts for the very things that we have, the competencies that we have, the skills that we have, the things that come naturally, the things you never had to work at. Some of you are incredible athletes. You never had to work at that. Some of you are incredibly healthy. And for some reason, you just always were just like really healthy. And some of you were always just seemed to have a potential to do math really well, or English really well, or great readers. See, there's all of these things that I look at and I'm like, man, I could spell a word, but I read at the pace that people talk. Now I talk really fast, so maybe I read a little bit faster, but I avoided reading because it would take me forever to try to get around those kinds of things. See, I would look at those things for years at the things that other people would do. We were talking just the other day in our Jumpstart group. I had my own struggles with ADD for a number of years, and I don't think in terms of systems. It made some people think I just was disorganized and I didn't have my things together, or I didn't care about people, or, I wasn't a detail person and everything else. And it made people really treat me in a limited kind of way. And so I could figure out, I had to figure out a process and a system. Some of you guys take that for granted. You have your closet all color coordinated. You know where everything is, and you've got your stuff together. People respect you for that. Like there's all of these things that all of us have. You know what? We didn't get a choice to say where we were going to be born, who our parents were, what country it would be in, what neighborhood we would grow up in. Like none of us grew up with that choice on us. We didn't have that opportunity. And with the good and the bad, what we have to say is that there's a lot of great things that we actually have that we need to harness and have gratitude for, that it's like, hey, you know what? I can look at my potential. And you know what accountability really looks like in someone's life? It's account for your ability. Listen, you're not accountable for what you don't have. You are accountable for what you do have. whatever that is, whatever your gift is in the world, whatever that skill is, whatever that passion is, whatever you grew up with, and you're like, man, this is easy, this is simple, this comes naturally. Maybe it's not too impressive. Listen, it's a gift to the world. Have gratitude for those things. Every day is an opportunity to really pay attention to those things in your life. Of the things that you do naturally, that maybe it takes you 10 minutes to do, that takes someone else an hour to do, a knack for something or whatever. Every one of those things is absolutely a gift. You know what? What else is a gift? It's some of the things that you actually have to work really, really hard to do as well. Gratitude that you can actually have an understanding that you can align things, that you can really work very hard to actually develop something. That position of gratitude in your heart goes in an extraordinary way. And this is a perspective that we can start cultivating rather than focusing on what we don't have or where our limits are or whatever. Okay, enough of that. Let me give you a second perspective that I believe that can really help. The second perspective is to tell yourself a better story that's based on what you value, that's also not focused on skills, abilities, and deficiencies. Oh, Paul, what the heck are you talking about that? Because that's a mouthful, right? Tell yourself a better story that's based on what you value, not focused on skills, abilities, and deficiencies. Well, I'm gonna grab my whiteboard really quick because I'll cheat as I'm conjuring up the memory of this from one of my clients. So some years ago, I had this client that I was working with. They were a high achiever. They had done all kinds of different stuff with regard to education, administration. They were really high up, and a lot of people respected them, knew them, and everything else. And so I'm thinking, this person's got an impressive resume. There were some new things that they were wanting to do in their life, and so that's why they had reached out. And along the way comes this moment where this individual is really sharing that they feel like a fraud. And I just feel like one day somebody's going to find me out, that I'm really not that great or whatever. And I'm looking at this person's accolades, and I'm like, this person's achieved a ton. They're doing a lot of stuff. Everybody thinks very highly of them and everything else. But see, it didn't really matter of what those things were. It was in their heart. They were kind of like, hey, this is what I feel. This is what I feel. And these are the things that I'm telling myself. And so I just said, well, tell me about that. And I'll give you a little bit of that dialogue in here. I just said, tell me about that. Well, here's the thing that she actually said. She actually said, oh, where are my words at? Where are my words? My words are not here. Where are my words? They're not there. Where did my words go? Oh my goodness. Paul, what happened to your words that were up here? Oh my goodness. I can't believe it. They just disappeared. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try one more time to put these words up here. And then if we're good, if we're successful, then I won't feel so foolish. Technology is great when it's working. When it's not, hey, it just reappeared over here. Is it reappearing over here? There it is. They just shrunk so small. So here's what she told me. She told me this. I was never as smart as my peers. And so you know what I do? And this is what we do as coaches. We're just like, well, really? Well, tell me about that. And so she starts telling me this story, because here's the thing is that all of us have stories. Your imposter syndrome has a story around it. It's a narrative. It's a perspective. So we change our story, we can actually change these things. And so here's what she actually said. I had to work hard for every grade I got when I was in school. And I'm like, all right, tell me about that. Tell me more about your story, because she's pretty convinced. Because here's what we do. That perspective, that little picture is really our story. It's the perspective that we have, because she's telling me a story that she's not smart because she had to work hard. And I'm going to show you how we can change the story and we can get out of imposter syndrome. Because her story was, well, I worked hard. That's why I'm not so smart. And I was like, well, tell me about that. Tell me more about that. And here's one of the things that she said. Well, When all my friends were out having a good time, not worrying about a test, I was up all night stressing and trying to pull out a good grade. Now that sounds relevant, right? Sounds like some evidence, depending on what lens that you're looking through, depending on what perspective you are writing your story from. But you know what we do as coaches is that if we stay in that perspective, because here's the thing, is that it's not enough to say I have imposter syndrome, that we have to at a certain point say, okay, well, what is the story that I'm telling that allows me to continue to persist in this? So here's a couple of questions that I began to ask her. What was so important about making the grade that you stayed up all night? What was so important that it made you cry? You said I had to work hard. No, you didn't. You could have partied. Isn't that true? No one made her go to school. Nobody made her stay up all night. The truth is that she could have partied and flunked out, right? That's part of the story. What was driving you? Tell me about your commitment. See, the more that I started asking questions and that she had to confront the reality that she looked at her story from a limited perspective. When you look for it from a limited perspective and you tell a certain story, you find ways to keep telling the same story and convince you of this thing. And so what I did is I just continued to ask questions. Tell me why this mattered so much. Why was it so important for you to go to school, for you to do these things? Then I start flipping the story. And I said, well, tell me, would you feel more confident today if you were so smart in school that you never went to class and you partied all the time and you made straight A's? Would you feel good about yourself? Would that validate you? And she was like, no, because I wouldn't have been working hard. I could have never lived with themselves. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what's most important. This is what we've got to get down to. This is what this whole thing is about. Because we get so caught up in comparison and seeing what we don't have and what other people have, when the reality is that we have to get down to the parts of the story that are truly most important. What do we value? I can remember in that line of questioning as I was challenging her story, her narrative. Imagine if you were your own student and you were crying and you were staying up all night, as opposed to the students that you have in your class that was making straight A's, but they were partying every night. Which student would you regard more highly? And it's asking these questions. No, I would regard this student because they're working really hard. Would you think that that person was stupid? Would you think that they were less talented? What do you really think? And you're like, no, those are my prize students. The people who've worked so hard, who've overcome what they believe their deficiencies are. They have overcome their fears. They have overcome the hesitations. They're able to look failure in the face, all of these things. And so you know what we end up doing is that as I'm writing this down and I'm listening to the narrative starts to change, so that now we have to change our narrative, not from I was not as smart as everybody else, is that I was the most committed person in my college. I was the most committed person who was willing to stay up all night, to do the work, to shed the tears, but to keep persevering through. See, we can tell any story that we want. I choose to tell a story where I am more resourceful and I'm persevering. Hey, maybe I wasn't given everything. I don't have a silver spoon in my mouth. What movie do you want to watch? Do you want to watch a Will Ferrell movie where everybody just stays up all night and parties and doesn't go to class? Because there's plenty of those. Or do you want the story of inspiration of someone who overcame what their limitations were and they utilized the skills that they did have and they didn't make excuses for it, but they made a change in their own life and they went after what they want? See, those are the things that are truly good stories. The other stories might be a fun little thing that you can laugh about, but it's not the story that we really dream about. It's not the stories that's told for a life that inspires generations. It's only those, because here's what's true. You know that all heroes have flaws. You know that every movie, if that person starts the movie and everything's perfect in them and they didn't have any obstacles and that you knew that they were going to get what they wanted in the end, that you wouldn't be interested in the story. What makes the story good is that that person might have had some rough skills. They might have had some talents, but they probably had some setbacks and some things. And what draws you into a story is you're like, I don't know if this person gets what they want. I don't know if they can overcome this. That's a good story. That's the perspective that we have to look at on our lives. First part of that perspective, be grateful. Live in gratitude for what you do have, because you are accountable for what you do have, not for what you don't have. Secondly, change the perspective on focusing on what matters most to you. What are the things in your character? What are the lasting kinds of things? What are the things that keep you up at night? Those kinds of things are the most important things, not what we don't have, and not somebody who's a little bit better or a little bit farther along or anything else. Listen, we're not imposters. Ultimately, we get results, right? Ultimately, if it takes me a year longer, 2 years longer, 5 years longer, that's a better story. You know why? Because it's a story about perseverance. It's a story about overcoming all of those things. A lot of you know my story. And I don't want to bore you with it because many of you have heard my story, but when I started working as a coach, I really felt like I had made so many mistakes in a short amount of time. And, many of you remember the recession that hit like 2007, 2008. We were one of those casualties that lost everything. And I had a really sick wife and I had 2 small kids, and I'd been working a job that was taking up all of my time. And we hit a wall in a lot of different ways in life. And I ended up making a transition to another job that I thought was going to help me care for my wife better, take care of my family better, everything else. I got laid off 4.5 months into that job. And there we had moved all the way to California, had extraordinary cost of rent, and had nothing. And I ended up getting a job that was a fraction of what I was making before, because again, my commitment was I need to get this husband and dad thing down. If I get anything down, I know what's most important. And I was doing that. When I started my coaching career, it's a little bit challenging to go out, and you don't even have, we scraped together this money to go and get trained and certified, all of that other stuff. And reality is that if I told you with all the details of basically skipping meals every day, of eating popcorn that was in the break room at my work, in the microwave, if I told you flying into the Bay Area on a bunch of rewards points for $15, taking a shuttle, sleeping in the airport because I didn't have money for a hotel that night, taking a shuttle all the way to where I needed to go to the training, literally walking 3 miles with my carry-on bag all the way to where I went to go get trained, getting dropped off at a Roach Motel from one of the students who was also in the class. All of those kinds of things that I could tell you a lot of stories that were about commitment. I don't sit around telling these stories all the time, but you need to know where I come from in those things. Is that, I'm not a product of my limitations and my struggles. When I started working with clients, even after doing everything to get trained and certified and everything else, when you got a 400 credit score and you're basically barely a living human being, and you're working with people who have so much more success tangibly than you, when you only own 1 pair of dress pants and 2 dress shirts, and you're alternating them, hoping that they don't notice, those kinds of things can kind of like be in your face and be haunting you and making you ask the questions: do I really have what it takes? Am I a fraud or not? Those are very real kinds of things. And it's all about perseverance. It's all about telling a different story and knowing that you do have something that you're bringing to the table. And you know what I found out about every one of my clients since then, even those first ones, is that I'd always find out, you know what? This person's looking at their life and they're like, man, I do not have it all together. I know this looks really good with this fancy car and everything else, but outside of that, I got problems. And I'm looking at myself like, man, and so you would see that imposter syndrome being true for so many of those high achieving clients that I worked with. All this to tell you that if you can shift these perspectives now, it's going to change your life pretty quickly. And it's real focal points, but it is a discipline. I believe that you got to get up in the morning and that you've got to focus on what's going on right. And the fact that the sun came up again, whatever you can give gratitude for, give gratitude towards those things. And choose again, remind yourself of the things that are most important in your life and have that as the determining factor in your life. What is most important, my moral compass, that thing that's in me, has to drive everything that I think about myself and my motivation to what I'm moving towards. So again, that I don't get stuck looking at everybody else and missing life. Let me pay the bills really quickly. This weekend's actually boot camp weekend. And boot camp is actually part of our Jumpstart program, so it's included. For those of you who have not gotten trained and certified as a coach yet, and you've been thinking about it, this is really the best way to go, because if you do the math, you get tons more. There's some people who are even watching today who are in this boot camp program, and I don't know why they want to listen to my voice right now, because they hear enough of me and they get enough of me, quite frankly. Boot camp is a part of Jumpstart. Jumpstart includes really every program that we offer. Our entry-level life coach certification course is in there. The boot camp that we're doing this weekend, which is a full Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we've altered the times. I know it's Super Bowl weekend. You will be done before the Super Bowl starts. We worked all of that out for you. You know, we didn't think way ahead, but we worked it out with the students to actually change the time so that you can get done. You can start on Friday night. It's all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And it is intensive. I will tell you, it is an intensive training, but again, it allows you to not only learn the core competencies of coaching, but it is live and online. There are Q&As at the end of every one of those sessions so that you're able to interact with me. You're able to interact with other students. There's role-playing demos so you can actually get practice working with other people, also watching other people role play, all of those things. And so that's what we're doing this weekend, but it's part of the Jumpstart program. Jumpstart doesn't stop at giving you just skills at becoming a coach. We give you the A to Z on how to actually develop your business, whether that's going to be traditional, hybrid, or fully online. And a lot of these things we've actually continued, because it's a dynamic program. We're always adding things to it. Jumpstart literally has hundreds of hours of training, because we have weekly group coaching calls. We have a lot of those archived over a period of, when we started this program actually in 2016. So now we are coming up in our 6th year. So we've got 6 years of all of that training, plus everything that we've continued to add in there. We have a brand camp that is also in your student dashboard that's over 13 hours of training that just shows you how to develop your marketing messaging for what you're doing. How do you choose your niche? How do you develop? We show you how to wireframe your website. How do you do search engine optimization? There's all of these things that's actually involved in that. How do you write a sales page? How do you write an email? All of these things that we include in all of this training. It's a lot of content. It's an immense amount of training, most of which you'll never actually completely get through. But what we're determined to do is that we're determined to give you more value than what you'll ever pay for. $97 a month with a 3-month minimum commitment. If you only want to do boot camp this weekend, which starts on Friday, goes all day Saturday and Sunday, it's $247. Now, I'm losing money to tell you this strategy, but I want you to know what you can do. $97 a month with a 3-month minimum commitment. Let's say that you only stick around for 3 months. Well, boot camp's only going to give you all of the things that are in boot camp, which is free listing on lifecoachmatch.com, your certificate, the exam, all of those things, the entire weekend. It's worth thousands of dollars. We only charge $247 for it. But if you do the math, $97 a month, and you're only coming out $97 to start, 3-month minimum commitment, you can stick around or you can cancel after that. When you sit around and you do the math for what you're getting, this is thousands of dollars worth of training, and you're only paying really a cup of Starbucks to come and join us, $3.25 a day. And if you did 3 months, that's $291. If you only do boot camp this weekend, that's $247. So it's a no-brainer to me that if I want to, because we don't want you just to be trained in coaching, we want you to be immersed in the culture of it, because I believe that coaching's more caught than taught. That's why we have an immersive weekend. You can also audit future boot camps when you join us this weekend. What are we covering this weekend? What is coaching? The 4 lenses of a first-class coach, the steps of a coaching session, building a coaching framework that gets results, focused, effective coaching that cuts out the fluff, how to help your clients maintain motivation. 2 models of coaching, core skills and characteristics for breakthrough coaching, best practices for ethical coaching, how to ask powerful questions, how to build coaching relationships that last, and what to include in coaching agreements. And there's a lot more. It is live. It's expanded training that we don't have in our entry-level course. It is, we include live Q&As, live coaching practice demos. You also get replays that we have posted by that Monday, and you can audit a future boot camp if you would like to. Again, if you want to only do boot camp this weekend, it's $247, and there is a payment plan for that. But I'd highly encourage you to do Jumpstart. There's a link to Jumpstart where you can get more information inside the description of this video. It's $97 a month. It's what I really wanted and needed when I started out as a coach. And one of the things that we've tried to do as a school is we know who our people are. And the people who join our school are people who really have a desire to break into coaching, but they need something that is self-paced, that actually works in their schedule, and in many cases, they need something that's that has more value. It's affordable without losing quality. And this is what we've tried to do: is that we've tried to take away any of the limitations. It's one of the reasons why I go after mindsets and belief systems so much. And that we're always on a regular basis giving away a lot of free content and free training, but we just want to see you thrive. We want to see you become proficient as a coach, but we want to see your practice thrive. And so if you want to join us, again, that link is inside the description. All right, let me jump over here and look at our chat. Chris says, I'm pretty stoked about boot camp this weekend. I am too. It's going to be amazing and fun. Can't wait. Awesome. Shane says, I'm going through it and it's great. Thank you. Everybody tells us to be grateful, but they do not tell us how to be the efficient way. Yeah. And the cool thing about gratitude is you can be grateful for anything that you want to be grateful about. I mean, there's no limit to. You could just look around the room. You could look, I was grateful that the weather was like 70 and sunny. Not to make you guys on the East Coast feel bad who are always in the polar vortex, because apparently the groundhog saw a shadow and you guys are going to get more winter. but there's anything and everything to be grateful for. I was exhausted last night for whatever reason, and my 9-year-old daughter called me to come in her room and play with Fidgets, which has become this crazy phenomenon amongst little kids where they play with fidgets and they trade fidgets. I don't get it. They're even trying to call Rubik's Cubes fidgets. And I'm like, no, baby, that's a puzzle. It's not a fidget. No, it's a fidget, Dad. And so she has all of this stuff laid out. And it's like, and the whole point of that being that I'm so grateful that my daughter at 9 years old, almost 10, still wants to play. That you can step into those moments, if you can step outside of yourself for a moment and pay attention to those things, that they're kind of there, and so much to be grateful for, though. Bill says, great thoughts, well presented. Thanks for today and all the Mentor Monday ideas you share. Thank you. Marcia says, always happy to listen and be a part. Thanks. You are so welcome. I appreciate it. Awesome. Andrea says, I needed to hear this. Thanks. Thank you. Melissa says, you don't look like you're going to be 50, look so much younger. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful for that. I attributed a lot of it to my parents, and especially these Arab genes. It's hard to turn this gray, which I'm very thankful about. My grandfather's hair started falling out, but what he did have was still black, oddly enough. So I'm very appreciative to my parents for that blessing. Awesome. Hey, John, good seeing you. Awesome. Hey, it's Tisha from New Orleans. Awesome. Very good. Anybody else? All right, everyone. Well, very cool. I'm going to put this thing back up because it's the thing that I would most recommend doing because it's just the best deal to go. Link is inside the description. We got room for you this weekend if you would like to join us. Again, I think that if you actually want to build a coaching practice, don't just simply go entry level. What I would say is spend the weekend with us, intensive time in coaching. And for those of you who have done boot camp before, you do get to come back again. So if you just want to sharpen your skills, spend the weekend, you've got that kind of time, you'll still be done before the Super Bowl. And so I would encourage you to join us because we want to upgrade our skills, but we also want to stay sharp. And so love to see you there. So anyway, listen, I appreciate you guys all immensely. Have a great rest of your week and take care.